Welcome to a talk based upon the Quantar digital alternative currency, a currency based upon the premise that to change the world, we will need to change the nature of our monetary supply. It is important to understand that this talk is beyond the classical communism-capitalism divide, the struggle for the ownership of the means of production, the ownership of the nation's businesses, for it is perfectly feasible for a publicly owned asset monetary system to coexist with a privately owned business structure. In fact, this is the only way in which the freedom of an authentic business community can truly thrive. The first unit of a nation's currency, then, is the most important unit which will ever be created, for its nature will colour the nature of all monetary units which will follow, and it was Aristotle who said, "Money is made for trade, not profit." So let us begin a journey into the nature of money. We are all aware of our spinning Earth, a blue pearl in a vast cosmos, a planet which could be a paradise of wonder, a field of dreams, a realm of Buddhas, but instead it has become a trail of tears, an egoic competition of struggle, greed, and forgetfulness. 1,000 dark flowers have arisen from the shadows, arisen from the dark side of the cosmic towel. And perhaps the greatest tree root which supports these flowers is the ignorance surrounding the nature of money. For the greatest struggles of all human history have been fought around the ownership and control of the money supply, fought around the two great financial questions: who shall create the money supply, and who shall derive the profits from the interest streams? Millions of people now lie in graves as the result of these monetary struggles. And yet the concept of money still seems to elude us. For every country is in debt, yet every year trillions of dollars in loans are made. Where does this money come from? Who owns this capital? And who owns the debt? What are their names and addresses? There are further questions. What is money? What is its measure? Why has the government turned the creation of the money supply over to the private bankers, abrogating its responsibility to create an authentic monetary supply, free from debt and usury, so that the politicians are now simply debt collectors for the bankers? Why do we create our money supply as debt burdened with compound interest, when we could create our monetary supply as an asset, interest-free? Are we monetarily enlightened then in our modern age, or are we ignorant? In ancient Sumeria, the interest streams were returned to the temple for the good of all. In ancient Rome, a debt was considered repaid when the interest accrued equaled the value of the original loan. We, however, will borrow $1 in the year 1500 AD at 6% compound interest and repay the debt in 2015 AD of $22.8 trillion, with $10 trillion arising in the last 10 years alone, and call this the laws of money, and there is no other way. Are we more ignorant then than an ancient Roman? For $1 loaned in 1500 AD at 0% compound interest in an asset-based monetary system will create a debt in AD 2015 of only $1. In 1694, the privately owned Bank of England was created with a charter to create money from nothing, to charge compound interest for this money, and to demand payment from the people for this interest in the form of taxation. It was the flexible debt instrument that the debt bankers had craved. It was the private banking license to steal the world with a dollar created from nothing. It was not a banking system, it was a crime scene. After AD 1694, the private debt bankers forced England to spend 40% of its annual budget upon the English armed forces and sent them out to invade all but 23 countries of the world, creating the English Empire, so that the debt bankers could impose their financial debt system upon humanity. It was debt banking from the barrel of a gun, and the US now performs the same financial role for the debt bankers, with at least 40% of the US budget also now spent upon the war machine. If you doubt this financial perspective, then take the time to study images of Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, and Syria, including the cities of Fallujah and Sirte, and then imagine the possible future images for Iran, North Korea, Russia, and China, before the dark financial net of usury begins to tighten and tighten its clasp upon us all. It was Nathan Rothschild who said, "I care not what puppet is placed upon the throne of England to rule the empire upon which the sun never sets. The man who controls Britain's money supply controls the British Empire, and I control the British money supply." It was a Rothschild banker who said in 1863, "The few who understand the system will either be so interested in its profits or so dependent upon its favours that there will be no opposition from that class, while, on the other hand, the great body of people, mentally incapable of comprehending, will bear its burden without complaint." It was Frederick Bastiat, political economist, who said, "When plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men living together in society, they create for themselves in the course of time a legal system that authorizes it and a moral code that glorifies it." It was Benjamin Franklin who said, "The colonies would gladly have borne the little tax on tea and other matters had it not been that England took away from the colonies their money, which created unemployment and dissatisfaction. The inability of colonists to get power to issue their own money permanently out of the hands of George III and the international bankers was the prime reason for the Revolutionary War." It was US President Abraham Lincoln who said, "I have the Confederacy before me and the bankers behind me, and for my country I fear the bankers most." When the money supply is created bearing 3% compound interest, then 40% of the final cost of retail products will be paid in interest and debt to the bankers. When income streams and sales taxes are added to the burdens upon the people, then fully 75% of the people's working lives, 15 out of every 20 years of the people's labour, goes in payments to the bankers. The people's freedom then has been only to exchange the iron chains of a slave for the unseen financial chains of debt peonage. This is the nature of a parasitic banking class which will absorb itself into the structure of its host until the host believes that the parasite is intrinsic to its own nature, even though this banking system is self-defeating for humanity. In 1913, the debt bankers set up the privately owned US Federal Reserve and the US Taxation Department to impose personal income taxes upon the people for the first time in US history. The original taxation document was only some 4 pages long and applied to only about 1% of the population. Now the documents run to millions of pages, and the taxation extraction process upon the people looks more like the actions of a torture chamber from the Middle Ages. Further, the people can never satisfy the debt bankers, no matter how many years they work or how many treasures and resources of the nation they sell, for there always remains another debt to be paid, another interest payment to be fulfilled. And the people are now so bewildered by the dark mists of debt finance that they have forgotten even the most basic of monetary concepts. It is as if the monetary ship of state is now upside down, so that the people are left staring in horror into Davy Jones's locker of usury. Our modern Wikipedia definition for money is whatever the government will accept in payment for taxes, which is surely only a definition of ignorance. We also have no measure for our money supply, so we use a fiat currency, that is, valued only by government decree, and the only monetary measure we can use is a comparison between other fiat currencies. There is also no limits as to how much of this fiat paper can be produced, so it is logical to suggest that it is intrinsically valueless. It is simply a privately owned confidence game imposed upon the people, and a US dollar is now only worth 2% of its original value when the US Federal Reserve was set up in 1913. The debt bankers' deception also includes the banknotes of our national currencies, which picture our national heroes, flora and fauna. However, we do not own these banknotes, but simply lease them as debt instruments from the private bankers, paying the bankers' interest as our lease payments. The banknotes would be more authentic if they instead pictured a set of chains upon one side and a demon or a parasite upon the other. However, We are trained from childhood to chase these banknotes with the hallucinatory passion of gamblers in front of poker machines, which are mathematically designed to destitute the players through time, using a gambling mirage of lights and alluring sounds. Beyond the creation of elaborate banknotes, the favoured tool of the debt banker is the national debt bond, the device by which nearly every nation falls upon the financial sword, as the bankers move in with their three weapons of financial destruction: debt, floating currencies, and free financial trade. Free as in managed trade, just as the freedom of the debt banker has also been defined throughout history as the demonic art of usury. The debt bankers deem that the governments cannot create their own monetary supply, as this would be inflationary, and instead the governments must borrow from the pre-existing capital of the global marketplace, capital and funds which are deemed to be awaiting a favourable opportunity to invest. Each nation's treasury then must take its request for money to the nation's independent or privately owned reserve bank, which is controlled by the forces of global finance, such as the privately owned Bank of International Settlements. The Reserve Bank then waves the smoke lantern of monetization upon the request, as if it is a financial priest in a ritual, an action which monetizes the financial needs of the nation, and the Treasury then returns to the people with its monetary supply created as privately owned debt, similar to a king who has returned in the robes of a beggar, for the money is now deemed to have been borrowed from the assets of the private marketplace. It is a financial action of dark magic to create a monetary system of debt and endless hunger, a betrayal of natural human destiny, and the greatest swindle in all history, as the bank has exchanged the lifeblood of the country for the chains of debt in a mirror of illusion. The independent or privately owned Reserve Bank, then, is little more than a mafia laundering device for converting the treasures of a nation into debt held within the hands of a cartel of private bankers. It is a medieval counterfeiting machine, designed to turn the cruel screws of usury upon an innocent population. It is a swindle, for the banker simply creates the funds with a stroke of a pen, and every banknote is an engraving of debt owed to the bankers. Sir Josiah Stamp, the director of the Bank of England, said in 1927, "The modern banking system manufactures money out of nothing. The process is perhaps the most astonishing piece of sleight of hand that was ever invented. Bankers own the earth. Take it away from them, but leave them the power to create money, and, with a stroke of a pen, they will create enough money to buy it back again. But if you want to continue to be the slaves of the bankers and pay the cost of your own slavery, then let bankers continue to create money and control credit." Denison Miller, the first governor of the Public Commonwealth Bank of Australia, shared this perspective when he said, "This bank is being started without capital, as none is required at the present time, but it is backed by the entire wealth and credit of the whole of Australia." It was Thomas Edison who said, "If the nation can issue a dollar bond, then it can issue a dollar bill. It is absurd to say that our country can issue bonds and cannot issue currency. Both are promises to pay, but one fattens the usurer and the other helps the people." It was Mackenzie King, Canadian Prime Minister 1935 to 1948, who said, "Once a nation parts with the control of its currency and credit, it matters not who makes the nation's laws. Until the control of the issue of currency and credit is restored to government and recognised as its most sacred responsibility, all talk of the sovereignty of Parliament and of democracy is idle and futile." It was US President John Adams who said, "There are two ways to conquer and enslave a nation. One is by the sword, the other is by debt." It was the US President Andrew Jackson who said, whilst talking to the private bankers, "You are a den of vipers and thieves. I intend to rout you out, and by the grace of the eternal God, will rout you out." The people then have come to dwell within a state of bondage. They exist as debtors who must rent their money supply from the debt bankers, and pay the debt bankers their interest payments for the privilege. This is the freedom the debt bankers exalt, the freedom of private enterprise banking, the freedom for the people to exist within the debt chains of a hidden private banker who dwells like a parasite wasp, dressed as a honey bee, in a fraudulent enterprise designed to steal the honey of the world. Debt bankers then take the instrument of the debt bond and convert it into an asset to be traded as a commodity. They turn the world upon its head. The mirror of natural finance is inverted. Debt becomes the asset, the shadow, the light, and the people, infected with a dark hallucinogenic drug of weasel finance, in their confusion, give the debt bankers the power to rule the world. In these ways, the debt bankers distort the natural destiny of humanity. For when the money supply is created in a sociopathic way, then the people too are forced into sociopathic states of being, just as iron filings are forced to align within a hidden magnetic field. The people then, bewildered by the simple mathematics of the swindle, eventually become filled with greed and darkly enchanted by the financial devices of the debt banker, those of fractional reserve banking, rehypothecation, derivatives, futures, debt swaps, etc. Until deluded, the people beg the debt bankers to teach them the dark arts of their monetary ways. The monetary fallen then become the teachers of the next generation, to be betrayed through debt economics and the irrefutable laws of debt money. The bankers want you to believe that they borrow only pre-existing capital when they make a loan, that they borrow existing funds from depositors at say 2% interest and loan out at 5% interest to make their profits from the interest spread. However, the bankers are borrowing their money into existence as debt, fundamentally creating their loans from nothing in a daisy chain of debt instruments, where debts become marked as assets, so that the debt itself becomes the monetary supply. The people are then left in the absurd financial position that if they paid off their debts, then they would have no money supply. This is a swindle of demonic proportions, and all these aspects are the terrible secrets of our monetary supply. Now we can understand where the $2 trillion of additional loans appear from each year when every country is heavily in debt. The loans are simply created from nothing, loaned into existence as debt. We can now see that we have had no banking renaissance since the Middle Ages. Even though we now crisscross continents in airplanes at great speed, our monetary system is the same swindle that we used in the AD 1600s. It is as if our airplane meals are served with the side dish of a medieval leech treatment. It is an incomprehensible situation born of monetary ignorance. Alan Brown, author of Web of Debt, said, "When you lend someone your own money, your assets go down by the amount that the borrower's assets go up. But when a bank lends you money, its assets go up. Its liabilities also go up, since its deposits are counted as liabilities. But the money isn't really there. It is simply a liability, something that is owed back to the depositor. The bank turns your promise to pay into an asset and a liability at the same time, balancing its books without actually transferring any pre-existing money to you. This spiraling debt trap that has subjected financially strapped people to usurious interest charges for the use of something the lenders never had to lend is a fraud on the borrowers." To escape our collective financial fate, then, we will need to create conscious, organised, national and international grassroots campaigns for public and political commissions into the inner workings and ownership of our monetary supply, to pull back the opaque curtain upon the nature of money and debt. It would be a sign that the people are finally waking up from the monetary slumbers of usury, and that we are no longer willing to be treated as human cattle or debt slaves to a sociopathic cartel who use the devices of debt, interest, inflation, and taxation to change the destiny of humanity. It is time to end the political charades of "these are the laws of money and there is no other way," and "our country has resources and people skills but no capital, so we must borrow our currency from the international debt markets." It is time the people were offered monetary alternatives, such as moving from a debt-based financial system to an asset-based financial system. For if there is such a thing as evil, then one of the horses he rides upon is the creation of the monetary supply as debt. There is, however, a solution to this debt matrix, a solution arising from the understanding that the debt structures have no authentic validity, that they have been created from nothing, with a deliberate intent to swindle. So the monetary solution is as simple as the debt game itself. For the debt which is created with the stroke of a pen can also be erased with the stroke of a pen. All that is required is for the banker's spell of the sanctity of debt to be broken within the minds of the people through a clear understanding of how the fractional reserve banking system creates debt from nothing. The debts can then be simply returned to the void using the legal tools of fiduciary duty, the laws of contracts, odious debt, and legal equity. This debt amnesty solution has historically been called the Jubilee, a point in time when all debts are erased, yet all assets remain. It is the simple pressing of the zero reset button, so that the people can now have 2 or 3 generations to consider the nature of finance before the burdens of compound interest again begin to tighten their clasp upon the economy. In a modern-day sophisticated Jubilee, all personal debts would be deemed void, while all personal assets remain. Company debts would be erased, including all the bankers' debt instruments. Debts between nations would, however, be honoured. A debt commission would be set up to handle any grievances of assets and debts erased in an unjust way. With the debt amnesty Jubilee, then the people would retain their assets, including bank deposits, so that they are free to live their lives. The companies are now recapitalised and can expand their businesses without losing all their current profits to the interest streams of debt. The banks too have their debts removed, yet their customers' deposit base remains, so that they are free to lend again. Countries honour the interest streams of debt with one another, so that there is no breakdown in the international order. Financial tools could also be put in place to make sure that there is no short-term inflationary spikes. The only people who lose in a Jubilee are those who run the debt game itself, those who receive the final financial profits from the global streams of interest, yet even they retain their personal assets. Further, if we consider that the Ponzi game of global finance has been running for more than 300 years, since the formation of the Bank of England in 1694, then even these financial architects must know that their debt system has reached the point of mathematical collapse, a collapse inherent in the nature of compound interest accumulating through time. A Jubilee would also greatly reduce the immense conflicts within our societies, which are created by the pressure cookers of debt. A Jubilee would also remove the sociopathic calls by some for international war, as the Jubilee would reduce the debt monster which has plagued us for the last 3 centuries down to a tiny and ineffectual shadow. A Jubilee, then, is an act of power in the same way that a child can walk up to an inflatable promotional monster outside a supermarket, and with a sharp object, simply reduce the monster to a pile of plastic upon the tarmac. We too need the intelligence and courage of this child. We too need to pierce the veils of ignorance surrounding the banker's sanctity of debt by using the sharpened perception of an aware populace. However, if we continue to use the same debt-based financial system, then a Jubilee will only free us temporarily from the debt trap, and within a generation or two the debt matrix would again begin to envelop us. So we need to reflect upon an alternative way of creating our monetary supply, which could sustain us for millennia. We have seen that if we use privately owned fiat debt money for our currency, which is backed by nothing, then we will have the problems of inflation, interest, debt, overprinting, rehypothecation, war, and the sociopathic abuse of power. Alternatively, if we use a basket of commodities such as gold, silver, and wheat as our monetary basis, then we will create problems of scarcity, debasement, hoarding, storage, theft, and the centralization and abuse of power. If we borrow our funds from the international capital markets for fresh investment because we have no national money supply, then we will be forced to pay the debt bankers their interest payments as our currency lease costs. All of these monetary solutions are simply cauldrons filled with seething financial serpents, for when the sources of government income begin to dry up, the interest payments upon borrowed currency become oppressive, and the people will be forced into austerity. We have also seen that when we issue money as debt, that every transaction creates a shadow which eventually plunges humanity into the dark well of usury. However, if we could create our money supply as an asset, then every transaction would instead create a financial light Quantar, so that through time humanity would become illumined with a natural incandescence. Debt money then creates the darkness of usury, asset money the light of humanity, a light which would include a huge potential for peace, abundance, and awakening. For an asset-based monetary system can use a publicly owned monetary unit, created as an asset, using zero or minimal interest. So let us walk now into the light of asset money, the other face of the monetary Tao, an asset-based monetary concept which has echoed throughout human history. For asset money existed as the gifting monetary system used throughout 4 million years of human hunter-gatherer existence. Asset money existed within the temple interest model from ancient Sumeria. It existed in the tally system of medieval Europe. It existed in the US during the War of Independence and the Civil War. It existed in 1930s Germany, which used an asset-based monetary system to pull the country out of the worldwide depression. In a modern asset-based monetary system, money would not be created as a debt in private hands, but as an asset controlled by the institutions of democracy. It would be created similar to the waters of a lake, relatively eternal, self-existing, and owing its nature to no one. The lake would simply dwell as a potential power source, similar to the waters behind a dam wall, which can be released in the correct amounts to irrigate the fields and to supply the electrical needs of the town, causing neither flood nor drought, neither greed nor poverty. This monetary lake would exist as a potential force, so that even if the entire panorama of human resources and physical treasures of the earth, projected ahead for the next millennia, was monetized and created as a vast lake, not one ripple of inflation would occur if the waters were released in only sufficient amounts to meet the natural needs of the people, moving in harmony with the earth and their personal quests for fulfillment. These waters of the lake would also continually recycle, so that the people are freed from the yokes of debt, taxation, interest, and inflation, creating an underlying peace, for it is the bitter taste of debt which often veils the sweetness of existence. In the presence of this monetary lake, the concept of having no capital for the people to access, to have austerity and hunger, would be an absurdity, a manipulation of the profound underlying abundance of cosmic law. It is the debt bankers, desperately seeking their own survival, who try and manipulate the people away from this true concept of money. For if the truths of the monetary lake are widely accepted, then the debt bankers will be cast into the financial prisons of history. It was Benjamin Franklin who said in 1763, "In the colonies we issue our own money. It is called colonial scrip. We issue it in proper proportion to the demands of trade and industry, to make the products pass easily from the producers to the consumers. In this manner, creating for ourselves our own paper money, we control its purchasing power, and we have no interest to pay to no one." We can suggest now, then, that throughout human history, the real money supply has been the life force of the people, and that all monetary systems are simply ways of organizing this life force into a financial structure. Historically, then, we have often created our financial structures based upon the iron chains of the slave, or the monetary chains of financialized debt. But why not use human life force itself as the measure for money? The solution avoids all the dilemmas of commodity currency, debt money, the borrowing of capital as debt from international bankers, and the problem of the availability of revenue streams for our national governments. We could call such a modern-day monetary system the Quantar, after the nature of quantum light, and it is a system which would use the limitless treasure of the human body psyche as its unit of currency. This Quantar currency would free humanity from our contracted historical forms of finance, which have usually involved a sociopathic financial class, loaning the people their own life force back to them, with the imposition of interest as the sociopath's profit stream. But how could we quantify human life force as a scientific monetary measure, which is naturally understood by the human mind? When Western science was faced with the dilemma of finding a cosmic constant for linear distance, it chose the speed of light. The speed of light is the distance light travels within a vacuum in 1 second, a distance defined as 299,792,458 units or meters. The historical monetary unit, then, used for 4 million years of human hunter-gatherer existence, measured by the speed of light, is the distance an average human of 80 kilograms walking at the normal speed of 5 kilometers an hour will cover in a time of 1 hour, that is, 5,000 meters. We can call this unit 10 quantars, and it is a measure which we all intuitively understand, for even our modern workforce is still paid as an hour of time and work. We are calling this monetary unit the quantar after light quantar, and it is a measure of human physiology, time, and the speed of light. It is also a unit which can be converted into calories, or quantar, or a myriad of other measurements. The name quantar also indicates that we are working with asset money, the light side of the yin-yang continuum, and that we are trading a sacred aspect of the cosmos, a sacred aspect which links thousands of years of human wisdom to the changing fields of modern consciousness. The Quantar uses Cyclos banking software to create an international trading market for goods and services, so that an unskilled labourer may charge 10 quantars for 1 hour of work, while a doctor may charge 100 quantars, as the doctor is bringing years of study and experience to the task. The prices for goods and services then, as in any monetary system, will vary according to personal skills, scarcity, the use of technology, social value, etc. A simple $8 annual fee is required by Quantar to ensure a legitimate Quantar registration, which creates a personal bank account with a seed credit of 500 quantars, a registration and credit which repeats annually. The Quantar then is not based upon scarcity of money, but upon the needs of the community, for it is absurd to have people with skills and natural resources, but to have no money to build the projects for tomorrow. So let us look at the Quantar monetary system in operation. We can imagine a situation where Mrs. T in Idaho needs her lawns mowed, but she has no money. John can mow her lawns, but Mrs. T has no money to pay him. John also wants a Japanese language lesson from a tutor in Tokyo, and the tutor wants a bag of vegetables from the local Tokyo market. The skills and resources are available, but we are gridlocked due to a lack of money. Mrs. T, John, the Japanese tutor, and the produce seller, however, could join Quantar for an annual registration fee of $8, which creates a Cyclos bank account with an initial credit of 500 quantars. We can note that the base Quantar rate is 10 quantars per hour, so 500 quantars is 50 base Quantar hours of work. This is quite a bargain then, for only $8. These 4 people can now trade their skills and resources for one another using Quantar currency based upon an agreed hourly measure. It is difficult to imagine even one good reason why these 4 people would not sign up to the Quantar concept if it was available, and if we assume that this concept is true, then we can predict that there are also another 7 billion potential Quantar traders awaiting for the opportunity to join Quantar. So 7 billion times the annual registration fee of $8 is $56 billion, plus the t-shirt sales, plus additional services. Then the potential Quantar income streams are huge. Quantar then only requires a group of like-minded people to begin the monetary concept, to enter the world's financial marketplace to see if a single snowflake of an asset-based monetary system can start an avalanche of redemption within the debt markets. I suspect that from the time Quantar reaches 50,000 members, that it will only take 5 years to change the world. Further, this presentation of Quantar is only an initial concept, and the group mind could modify Quantar into any format of choice. Quantar then is a great concept for a crowdfunding proposal, especially when the startup costs are modest, bordering on negligible, with the superb Cyclos software, including phone banking, ready to go straight out of the box. A national or government-owned Quantar monetary system would also require no personal income taxes, as the system can simply generate its own Quantars to pay for the necessary projects for the community, perhaps using as a guideline the ancient question, how will this project affect the lives of those 5 generations ahead, those who are yet to be born? Further, Upon a national level, the Quantar concept would also allow us to escape the noose of our current debt bondage through seeing the nature of debt money as a criminal contrivance, so that we can use the legal tools of fiduciary duty, the laws of contracts, odious debt, legal equity, and a financial jubilee to void the debt matrix. The Quantar concept then is based upon the principle that if money is created in a sociopathic way, then the people will be forced into sociopathic states of being. However, if the money is created in an authentic way, as an asset, with integrity, then the people will live with authentic states of being. The nature of money then is the unseen magnetic field which aligns the structures for our world. Quantar then simply exists like the tally system of the Middle Ages. However, Cyclops banking software is more efficient, as it does not require an army of banking clerks to adjust ledgers. Quantar also does not pretend that it is loaning existing funds borrowed from someone else. Quantar has simply monetized the endless potential of human life force and natural resources to form a lake of monetary potential, and the waters of this Quantar lake can now be released in the correct amounts to ensure neither flood nor drought, neither inflation nor debt. The Quantar concept then is an educational device designed to explore the nature of asset banking, a system which does not require the vampiric existence of a debt banker to stand between the people and their natural life force. Also, just as Facebook was a simple concept with a few links upon a single university campus, now grown into a planetary colossus, so too could Quantar eventually become a concept with global significance. To change the world then, we need to simply change the nature of money, to find a higher octave of finance, and if 10 people understand this monetary concept and transmit it to 10 further people, then, within only 10 repetitions of this monetary chain, the entire planet would be introduced to a new monetary concept which could revolutionize our world. It would be a monetary revolution arising from perhaps 3 stages of awakening. Firstly, from the understanding that our current monetary system is nothing more than a medieval swindle, a crime scene of usury. Secondly, through the creation of a movement towards the freedom of a modern-day monetary jubilee. Thirdly, through the creation of a fully functional, modern, asset-based monetary system, such as the Quantar. Welcome then to the Quantar, a financial pathway to a light-based universe and a new monetary paradigm to change our world. I hope you have enjoyed this journey through the tapestries of our debt and asset-based monetary systems. Thank you.